Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. Finally, we're going to continue on with my Group 1 car reviews. This is a series in which I'm going to review the entirety of the Group 1 category before coming out with a final ranking from worst to best for every single one of the Group 1 machines. Now, I did put this series on a bit of a hiatus just due to being ill earlier on in January. Unfortunately, I was just unable to carry on this series, but it is returning with the Group C legend, the Nissan R92CP. So as always with this series, we'll start off with the pricing before talking about the history and then reviewing the car in GT7 itself. So the R92CP, obviously from the 1992 year, is going to cost you 2 million credits, a little bit of a reduction in price there. In terms of the overall PP rating, it's 850, 788 brake horsepower, weighing 900 kilograms and is turbocharged. So some decent stats to back up this absolutely legendary vehicle. Again, much more on the cheaper side, with a lot of these Group C's kind of very much fluctuating in price. Seeing this one hit the 2 million credit mark is absolutely fantastic and definitely feels like a bit of a bargain. So let's talk about the history of the R92CP. So the car itself, let's get some history on it. So in terms of the car, it is based on the R90C platform, which was a successor to the R89C. Now in terms of the car itself that we're seeing in game, it does appear to be the #1 car, which was driven by Hoshino, Suzuki and Wada for the 1992 all Japanese sports prototype series. Now in terms of the car itself, it was insanely successful in that series. It basically went on to win the championship itself, and in terms of all 6 races that it entered, it won all 6 of them. This was an insanely successful car and is very much well deserved for its legendary status in game. One of the most notable things for this car itself was its insanely high top speed. It was clocked at doing 249 miles per hour down the main straight at Fuji. This car was certainly no slouch. So overall, it was a very successful race car. We didn't see it necessarily sort of fade away or, you know, kind of have a great season and then drop off as it became outdated and such. Obviously based on a, you know, platform that originated in 1990, this car then showed itself in 1992, went on to be very successful, and then in 1993 Nissan basically pulled out of prototype racing all the way up until I believe like 1997, where they obviously eventually did return for a short time anyway. So yeah, in terms of the car itself, very successful racing history, very much a legend of motorsport in its own rights, mainly over in Japan and such, but again makes sense considering this game is made by a Japanese developer. Now let's talk about the car in terms of Gran Turismo 7 itself. So it just feels like one of those cars that is almost a staple of the series at this point. It first appeared in I believe Gran Turismo 4 way back in the day and has always featured in pretty much every single mainline game. The only one it didn't necessarily feature in straight away was Gran Turismo Sport, but it did end up coming along in the May update of 2018, I believe update 1.18 or something like that. So it did eventually make its way into the spin-off series as well. So it is very much a staple of the games, and obviously it is a day 1 release in terms of GT7 itself. This is a very popular car, known for being very quick, having that insanely amazing brutish sound that it absolutely chucks out. It is also known for one of the license tests as well, which was a very kind of hit and miss for a lot of people on the early stages of GT7's life cycle. I don't know if you guys may remember it, but way back when it was a very difficult license test, it almost kind of appeared out the blue as a very fast section at the end of Le Mans, and originally it made me absolutely hate this car when I first saw it in game, just because of how difficult that license test was to actually get past. Obviously it's been made much easier as time's gone on, so you know, and the more I've kind of, you know, played around with this car over time, it's kind of disappeared as well in terms of that overall, you know, horrible feeling that I had for this vehicle to begin with. So after almost, you know, nearly 2 years of owning this car in game, what do I think of it? So before I went into this review, I had a bunch of tunes for it. It's perhaps one of the most useful cars in the game, especially for for the likes of Sardinia and Spa as well, built to an 800 pp spec. This thing is almost a next level, right up there with the likes of the Mazda 787B. However, if you want to just go for flat out speed, to be honest, the Nissan is just absolutely ridiculous at those tunes as well. The high speed acceleration on this thing is absolutely brutish. But in terms of the standard version that we're reviewing here, where it will be straight out of the Legends dealer for you, it's pretty much the same story. This thing is a rocket ship. Now, it does have a slight bit of turbo lag, which isn't too noticeable. However, it is there. So if you are not a fan of cars with even the slightest bit of turbo lag, you may be off put by this. However, once that turbo gets going, this thing will absolutely rocket itself out of corners and rocket itself down the main straight. Couple that with absolutely ridiculous downforce and you've pretty much got a car that can do absolutely everything. It's just one of those cars that's so good anywhere it goes. In terms of the Nordschleifer itself, I was a little bit anxious about you know, this Group C itself. A lot of the cars have this tendency to, especially through the tighter sections, really bounce around and become massively unstable. This is not a thing that I noticed with the Nissan. It just seemed completely planted the entire time, and even with that brutish acceleration that just wants to kind of throw you in the barrier, once you get a hand on this car and start getting used to it, honestly, the driving ability of this thing is just absolutely bonkers. Couple that with a straight line speed that pretty much nearly matches that ridiculous 249 miles per hour even out of the box, you have a massively serious contender for possibly the best Group C. Now, the only real downside of this car, really, in comparison to what is probably the most popular one, which is the 787B, is probably the fuel economy. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still good, but it's just definitely not as good as what we see with that rotary engine. You know, the tyre life on that thing and the fuel consumption is absolutely insane, and the Nissan just doesn't quite match it. But overall, in terms of fun factor, drivability, and just being an absolute amazing machine, I'd honestly say perhaps the Nissan is just my favourite over the 787B, apart from maybe the sound. So let's have a look where this car ends up on our lap time leaderboard. It comes overall in 8th position, just behind the likes of the Audi VGT, Toyota GR010 and the Toyota TS050, which currently leads the way in terms of lap times for these Group 1 machines. It is currently the fastest of the Group C cars by a fair margin, taking over 2 seconds away from the Sauber Mercedes C9 from 1989 and absolutely decimating the Jaguar XJR9 from 1988. This thing is a serious bit of kit, considering its PP rating does sit relatively lower than a lot of the other cars around it. Honestly, great car. So if you want a car that is fun, fast, and can be built to some ridiculous specifications for around about 2 million credits, this is perhaps one of the best investments you can make currently inside GT7. The Nissan R92CP currently stands as my favourite of the Group C Group 1 cars, and possibly my favourite overall so far. Massive thank you to everyone that has supported the channel recently, and I'm glad to just be bringing this series back so we can finally get that ranking done, hopefully in a few months' time. This was my first big project of 2024, and I certainly want to continue it on to the future. Thanks so much to all these guys listed above. You guys are absolutely fantastic. I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.